Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero. Our guest today is Billy Ray. Now, this episode is hosted by Pete and Scott Huesing, and we're all writers and love having writers on the show. There's a camaraderie in the mutual participation in such a solitary activity, and Billy Ray goes deep into the psychological on the process, the functions, and the business of screenwriting. His screenplays include The Hunger Games, Hart's War, Overlord, Captain Phillips, and the upcoming Terminator Dark Fate, and Gemini. Let it sink in that he's writing for performances by the likes of Jennifer Lawrence, Ben Kingsley, Bruce Willis, Woody Harrelson, Clive Owen, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Will Smith, and Tom Hanks. So when the biggest stars in Hollywood are asked to play a part, there's a pretty good chance that Billy Ray has been asked to write. That's a great place to be in your career, but we all know it's not easy getting there, and Billy Ray shares with us his journey. We know you're going to love this conversation with our special guest today, Billy Ray.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Moranis.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is Billy Ray, and you're listening to The Break It Down Show.
And now, The Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yeah, holy shit, Scott set this up. So, Scott, as always, thank you. I'm just going to give a couple of movies that you've written the screenplay for. How about The Hunger Games, Captain Phillips, and I have to mention because Jeff Calhoun said so. He said your work, and he's a screenwriter, your work on Suspect Zero was genius. So peer-to-peer, the genius tag, that's holy shit.
It was not, but I thank you very much.
I think, I'll just start off by saying one of my favorites was Secret in Their Eyes.
Thank you.
Julia Roberts. I mean, such a transformation for that actor, for Julia Roberts was
brilliant.
And just the writing, man. I'm watching the thing, and what's even cooler now when you get into the entertainment business, and I want you to share a story that when you first started out in this, when you see the opening credits and it says written by, and you say, I know him. And knowing the person and then seeing their work, just as you would a carpenter or a guy that fixes cars or builds or whatever, it's like you see that work and you think, man, that is amazing, because you really do know what goes into that. I mean,
I am so glad you compared it to carpentry or building a car, because that's how I think of myself. You know, I think where people get in trouble when they imagine a career in the entertainment industry is they think that there's something mythological about it or something mystical about it. I'm just a mechanic. I spend my day solving problems. 95% of writing is just problem solving. And I never think about it like art. I just think about it as work. I'm trying to get a character from here to there. How do I do it in the most efficient way possible? And if you go to a Starbucks for 2 hours every day waiting for your muse to land on your shoulder, you're just going to be the guy at Starbucks. You want to just approach it like a mechanic. When a writer is stuck and he or she calls in another writer for help, that other writer doesn't say, what's the art problem? That other writer says, what's not working? And they lift up the hood and they fix it. And that's what you do. And if you can think of writing in that way, at the end of every day, you can look in the mirror and say, I did my job today. And as Patty Chayefsky, the great writer, would say, if you're an artist, it'll come out as art anyway, but you can't approach it that way. And so I do think of myself as a mechanic.
It's such sound advice, because Pete is actually one of the members of the documentary I'm putting together when I first started this thing, and I'm working just the boring work part of it, the contracts, and I go, who do I ask for help on this? And being surrounded with so many great people, I send Billy a text. And this is a testament to your commitment to not just helping veterans, but helping people, like being a friend.
Thank you.
And I email him, he says, yeah, call me. And it's like, I send him my number, he calls me, it's like 10:30 at night, he's up working, he's still working, we're always working. And he used that same analogy, and it stuck with me this day, is look at building this project, this documentary, like you would opening a restaurant. He goes, you put in the burger grill, and then you do this, and you pay these guys, and at the end of it, they don't get a cut out of all the hamburgers you sell. You pay them up front. And so I'm like, genius. Again, it was another gem that I got out of just being associated with so many cool
Well,
people.
thank you. Look, part of what it is you got to take the terror out of writing, right? And there's a way to do that, but one of the ways to do it is, do you know how to do? Well, we've talked about this in class. Do you know how to do a sculpture of an elephant? You start with a block of granite, and then you chip away everything that's not an elephant.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
That's Michelangelo. He said that too, right?
Did he really?
Yeah, he
okay,
absolutely
good.
did.
Well, as Picasso said, good artists borrow and great artists steal.
Yeah.
And I'm endeavoring to be a great one. So your block of granite is everything you know about the story you're going to write. You've been making notes to yourself for months or years on, pads of paper, or you've been recording stuff on your phone or on cocktail napkins, but it's just a bunch of ideas and they're sort of unedited and they're kind of a mess, as they should be. That's your block of granite. It's everything you know about that world. And then you step back. Let's say you were going to write about what it's like to fight in Iraq or Afghanistan. You'd have a million ideas, right? And you'd write them all down and it'd be unformed. But then you'd step back and you'd say, okay, where's the story in there? What's the simple emotional journey? As in terms of there's no place like home. Love conquers all. Emotional ideas. Where's that idea in there? That's your elephant. And then you just strip away everything that isn't that idea. And what's left is your story. And then you just go tell it.
So Jeff Calhoun wrote a book that just came out. It's called The Guy for Every Screenwriter. And he talks about just like breaking things down into even simpler and simpler and simpler things. Like even the log line. He's like, the log line are just these three elements. Don't overthink it. It's 2 lines and then you're done. And then he gives examples of ones that work. I think from someone who tries to write things, we get so wrapped up in the whole big elephant that we don't, it's...
Okay, well, David Mamet, who's a pretty great writer, he says every screenplay must answer 3 questions.
Okay.
Who needs what from whom? What happens if they don't get it? Why now? If you can answer those 3 questions, you've probably got a story.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not quite that simple, but it just start with those 3. I'll give you an example. When Captain Phillips, when that story was still happening, when it was unfolding on CNN, Sony bought the rights to it. And I'm at a place in my career, thankfully, where typically when people offer me something, I get a week to think about it exclusively. I'm not competing with other writers to decide whether or not I want to go chase it. That's not what Captain Phillips was going to be. Captain Phillips was going to be a beauty pageant. Like every writer in town was going to be allowed to come in and pitch that story. So I had to think to myself, okay, do I want to go do this? Because at this point in my career, if I chase after something like that and don't get it, it hurts my brand.
Yeah.
And there's a real cost to that. But I thought about what Captain Phillips was. There are no true stories that lay out like action movies. They just don't exist. You always have to invent some kind of shit. But with Captain Phillips, I didn't have to. The beats of an action movie are just part of the DNA of that story. So it was something I really, really wanted. And I decided it was worth going in and pitching and competing, like all writers have to do. But then I sat down and I said, okay, what's my pitch going to be? What actually happens in that movie?
Yeah.
Okay, well, narratively, you could make the argument that what happens is a white guy gets kidnapped by 4 black guys and 3 of them get their heads blown off. And I thought, not only do I not want to write that movie, I don't even want to see that movie. That sounds horrible. Right. So I said, okay, how can I reframe this? How can I look at this through a slightly different lens so that it's a story that I love and a story that I want to tell? And I thought about it for a day or so. And then when I went into Sony, what the pitch was this is a story about leadership. It's about 2 captains who wake up on opposite sides of the globe and they both get dressed and they go to work. And their work is going to put them on a collision course. And when they meet, we're going to find out that one of these captains would sacrifice himself to save his men, and the other would sacrifice his men to save himself.
Wow.
And that's the movie. And that is the movie. That's what I wrote. But my point is, it's a slightly different look at the exact same story beats, but one brings out the humanity in the story, and the other is just kind of stark and unappealing. And so when you're thinking about that block of granite that you've assembled, everything you know about your given story, try to look at it through the lens that is going to make it a story that you're capable of telling and that you want to tell and that you think has a simple emotional journey embedded in it.
Well, I like how even just with the pitch for that movie, to boil it down, it went from the macro, which was kind of a
what was on TV.
Yeah, it was on TV and like could be considered literally and figuratively as black and white. To what you teach and what makes your work so great is character development. It became about people,
right? And
those were the most important components of that story as you watch it. And it's always a bonus when you get Tom Hanks involved
here's
in
the thing
film.
about that. In my mind, there was never anybody else that could play it, and it wasn't like I was picturing him while I was writing because I knew the real Captain Phillips, so I was picturing the real Captain Phillips. But all the while, I knew there was no one but Hanks that could play that part because Hanks' whole career is ordinary men placed in extraordinary circumstances that have to rise above what they thought they were.
So is he in your writing then? I mean, you know it, but does that translate into like what's the words are that Captain Phillips is going to say in the movie?
No, it didn't at that point.
Okay.
I was very, very fortunate on that movie because Hanks's agent was tracking the project the entire time I was writing it. I think he always sensed it was the right thing. It was the right thing for Hanks. So I wrote it. It went to my agents. My agent sent it to Hanks' agent because they're at the same agency. And it went to Hanks, and Hanks was in.
Yeah.
And it happened in about 2 seconds. That never happens on movies. We had Hanks before we had a director.
Wow.
And then we had every director in town chasing us.
Of course.
And they all wanted to come work with Hanks, of course.
When you're writing this thing, again, thinking about what Jeff has taught me, less words is more. Let the director and those folks do their job. Let Tom do his job. So when you're trying to write this, the SEALs that take the shots, that's incredible.
Yes.
But you don't need many words to do that. How do you do that?
Well, the way we find out who a character really is not by what they say, it's by what they do.
Okay.
Right? Our actions define us.
Yeah.
If I sit down here and make a long, beautifully articulated speech about my love of vets and how I'll do anything for the vets.
Yeah.
But what the camera sees is that I'm actually reaching into Scott's pocket and stealing his wallet. Well, I've defined myself by my actions, not by my words, right?
Yeah.
It's what happens when the sound is off that matters. And particularly with a movie that's as muscular and visceral as Captain Phillips, those SEALs didn't have to say much. They don't say much. They do their job. And one of the things that was most striking to me about the SEALs is that when that work was done, there was no moment where they waited for Captain Phillips to get on board and thank them. They were like packed up and gone.
Yeah.
They didn't need the thank you. That's not what they do.
Yeah.
That's a gift to be able to write characters like that. The bigger picture is try thinking about subtext. Okay? So subtext can be defined as all the stuff between and beneath the words. It's all the stuff that's not said, right? But that's what actors act. Actors act the stuff that's in the parentheses. For example, there are 50 ways to say I love you that are a lot more interesting than I love you, right?
Yeah.
I love you can mean I hate you. I love you could mean I'm bored. I love you could mean I'm scared. I love you could mean you're annoying me. I love you could mean a lot of things that are all super interesting, and they all give actors something to act. And so the thing that jumps out most commonly when I read the uninitiated among writers, just inexperienced writers, is that they write without subtext. Characters are always saying exactly what they're thinking or exactly what they're feeling. And that gives actors nothing to do. If you write without subtext, you are going to be writing a movie that's just sort of a staged reading of your wonderful screenplay. And no one needs to go see that. You want, if a character is asking a question and the other character's answer is no, it's better if their dialogue is yes. Right? So, for example, if a man says to his wife, "Have you been faithful to me?" and the answer is no, great if that's the subtext. And what she actually says is, "Of course, honey," because then I'm leaning in. as an audience member, I'm thinking, okay, I know that, of course, Honey's bullshit. Now I got to watch and find out what the real story is. And again, it gives something for the actors to do.
What happens to you as a writer when you come up with the last word on the 120th page of the best script you've ever written, and it gets sold? It's going to be the best movie, and the actors or all the other forces that be come to play, and it turns out being something slightly or vastly different than what you wrote. Is there a certain level of disappointment at times, or sometimes?
Okay, well, first of all, I've never had a moment where I finished something and said, that's the best thing I've ever written. Never. And I've never had a moment where I've written something and I've said, oh, Billy, you genius, you've struck again. Ever. When I'm done, I hopefully feel that it works. Without exception, when I'm done with a first draft of a screenplay, the very first thing I do is I drop to a knee and I thank God for the opportunity and for the ability and for the people that have supported me and helped me so that I could actually do this. And I ask God to bless this work and to help me make it better. That's the first thing I do when I'm done. It's a very humbling experience. And then you start the actual work of writing, which is the second draft, the third draft, the fourth draft. Captain Phillips, by the time I sent it off, was a 15th draft. So the first draft is again, it's a block of granite that you step back from and say, okay, where's the elephant in there? Just like the first cut of a movie is a block of granite. You see the first assembly of a movie, it's 4 hours long. You go, okay, where the hell is the movie in there? And let's start getting rid of stuff so we can actually get to our story. But in answer to your question, when you are writing for yourself to direct, that's one experience where you're going to be the person shepherding it and trying to get great work out of other people to help you realize some vision of a movie. When someone else is directing the movie, you have to think of it as a relay race. Like, your script is your lap, and then you hand off the baton to a director. And at that point, you can follow the director around the track if you want. You can be right behind them as they run their lap. There's not much you can do to change how they're going to run it. And if they decide that they want to run it backwards, if they want to run it doing jumping jacks, or if they want to run it on their belly, they're the director. That's it. You're there to support them. But you can't change fundamentally what they do. So sometimes a director goes off with your screenplay and comes back with something that's different from what you wrote, and it's Captain Phillips. And you say, thanks. I got nominated for an Oscar because you did your job so well. Thank you. Most often, they come back with something that you don't totally recognize and that you don't completely believe in the same way that you did when you wrote it. That's part of it, too.
Do you ever have a personal level of disappointment when that happens? Yeah.
All the time.
But what's great, I think, with you is because you always are preaching and teaching, just do the work. And you have very regimented day-to-day work schedule,
yes,
which is something that advice I like to pass on that I've learned from you and other people throughout my short career in this field is just write something every day. And you're right, it doesn't all have to be great. And I always love hearing the answer to the question when I say, like, well, how many screenplays have you written that are just stacked up?
Sure.
That you, one, didn't feel were pitchable, or two, got rejected? I mean, what's that number at this stage of your career?
Oh, my God. Well, let's start with the work ethic part. I'm at my desk at 8. Somebody feeds me at 1. I'm back at my desk at 1:15, and I go till 6. And during that time, I'm not surfing the web. I'm not gambling online. I'm not trying to find ex-girlfriends on Facebook. I'm just working. And if you do that, you can get a lot done. A 10-hour workday, you can get a lot done. There are screenplays that I've worked on that will never get made, that are, big heartbreaks for me. And these are screenplays I've been paid for that'll never get made. So I'm, miles ahead of people who are writing stuff on spec and not getting it made. I had a show on Amazon last year that I got to do a full season of that was the greatest working experience of my life. The most fun I ever had by far. that didn't get picked up for a second season. Easily the biggest career disappointment I ever had. Kind of wanted to roll on the floor and cry for a couple days. But, compared to having to take a small village in Iraq, really not that big a deal. Disappointing, but nobody was firing bullets at me. And as long as you maintain that perspective and discipline yourself to learning something from every disappointment, you get better.
Where did you gain that perspective? Just with that analogy.
Just experience.
Yeah.
I grew up with an awe of soldiers. Saw a lot of World War II movies as a kid. But I actually think Saving Private Ryan changed my life. I remember being in that theater during that first sequence, and I remember actively thinking I would pay $1,000 right now for this scene to be over. I can't fucking take this one more minute. It was so grueling. And I don't think I've ever looked at the world the same way since. As I get older, my awe of what those soldiers did, what you guys have had to do, just grows. It's very, very tough for me to get too upset about things that happen in the business. My kids joke with me about how I've said to them, when I die, put me in a pine box. That's what the guys at Normandy got buried in. I don't know why I deserve better than that. And that's how I feel. So, yeah, huge disappointments.
That's a tough perspective to share kind of in this town and in certain arenas where there is a lot of self-entitlement and people take a lot of things for granted. As we sit here under the canopies at, this quaint little coffee shop in West Hollywood. And I try and share that with people in my community. And a lot of them get it because they've been through that or they've been family members. But when you got a teenage kid who they see what you do and some of the events you go to and the success, and that's their world. That's their perspective.
I know, but,
And you have to kind of bring them to reality. Do you share you like sharing that?
It's a running joke that I have with my son, who's 17 and about to go to college, which is another incredible blessing. If he's complaining about how the Wi-Fi is slow at the house,
First world problem.
I say to him, do you know who's not complaining about Wi-Fi right now? And he says, who? And I say, Anne Frank. Yeah. And he just cracks up every time because he knows I'm going to drop that on him. And, it gets to the point where he'll say, who's not? I'll say, do you know who's not worried about getting shitty reception on her Sirius XM in the car? And he'll say, Anne Frank. And I'll say, yeah, that's right.
Seriously.
But it's not lost on him.
No, he totally gets what's funny about it, but he understands the perspective that I'm trying to impart. And I find that people in Hollywood are starting to get it in a different way. And this crosses a boundary, so forgive me. But since the election of Trump, which so totally shattered the worldview of 99% of the people that I work with, it is much easier to get a hold of them in terms of perspective. It is much easier to grab their attention in a different way. The joke for 40 years used to be about movies. Well, it's not heart surgery, right?
Yeah.
It's really not heart surgery. It's hard, but it doesn't have the life and death repercussions that does. Now you can talk about politics in the same way. That, it's upsetting that our movie got pushed by 2 months. Yeah, that's a huge bummer. But it's not the same thing as suspending the rule of law, right?
Yeah.
Or going after freedom of speech, or not taking care of the people of Puerto Rico.
Either side, I know, especially in LA, it's easier to, lean on one side or the other. And, it's viewed vastly as a very liberal, community. And that's why I like sharing a lot of your stuff on Twitter. You're not afraid to get political when need be. And you throw it out there.
Thank you.
At least your opinion. And I don't care what.
By the way, I'm as critical of the far left as I am of the alt-right. My daughter, who's 23, does not know the name of her own representative in Congress, but she definitely knows the name AOC. And I talk to her all the time about what the danger of AOC is and why AOC may be pulling our party to the left in a way that's not good for the party. Because leading up to the midterms, I and another writer named Greg Hurwitz, you might know his books, the Orphan X
Oh,
books.
sure. Okay.
Incredible novelist, and annoyingly has published 20 novels, and he's 44.
Underachiever.
Really
Greg.
pisses me off. But anyway, Greg and I worked with 30 Democratic House candidates on messaging leading up to the midterms. How to sound less like a Democrat. How to make arguments that independent voters and sensible Republicans could actually hear. These are people that were running in New Mexico and Oklahoma and Michigan and Wisconsin and Minnesota and Ohio and Florida. They were all running in red districts. Even the ones in California that we were working with were running in red districts. These are not people who could walk into a room and say universal health care for all or Green New Deal or free college tuition without getting laughed out of the room. So none of the stuff that AOC is talking about can help these people, and it all hurts them because they then have to be defined by this one person who's got an outsized voice within the party. Inside the Democratic Party, the centrists are winning, as they should. People who talk about healthcare in a centrist way or talk about immigration in a law and order centrist way, they're actually the ones who are making policy in the party. And for one voice outside the party to be shaping the debate is a really dangerous and inaccurate thing. That said, I'm far more afraid of the alt-right, far more afraid of Trump and his attack on the rule of law. So yeah, I tweet about him all the time. And in the world of walking your walk, I'm making a movie about it. I mean, I just adapted James Comey's book, and I'm making a 4-hour, 2-night movie for CBS and CBS All Access. And there will be real scenes with an actor playing Comey and an actor playing Trump, in which we're going to tell the truth about what that relationship was and why it was dangerous. And, you know, I think the best case scenario is I come out of there with a mean nickname from him. I think slightly more likely is I get audited by the IRS. And worst case scenario is, you know, I go full Khashoggi and I walk into a building one day and I just never walk out again because Trump has decided that I need to be killed.
Yeah.
That is not
I don't
beyond
think you can discount that.
That's not beyond the realm of possibility.
Maybe not at the far end of the spectrum, but when you start reaching into that world, the phone call these powerful elected officials can make to say that guy needs to get audited. There's nothing more painful than being audited or having to go through all of your your taxes,
I would say taking a village in Iraq is a lot more painful and a lot more costly. But in my world, would that be scary? Yeah. Would it be scary to think that someone out there with a gun could disagree with my right to make that movie? Sure.
Not that far from the truth. And there are big village in Iraq consequences. I mean, the guy that wrote the story about Stanley McChrystal and his crew in Rolling Stone, that guy's dead.
Right.
And he died from his brakes failing. What? You know, like, okay, maybe it's completely innocuous and innocent, but when you play from a position of power, and I'm not in any way saying that Stanley or his crew did anything, but the leap to get from there, it's, you know, it's like the Clintons have all this stuff, like all these bodies, like, okay, great. And like the JFK assassination, all these bodies, someone died from a karate chop. You're like, well, all right. But that leap isn't that big for a lot of people.
If you have power in Washington, you're going to make a ton of money.
Yeah.
That's the problem with our government. It's the problem with the Citizens United decision that the Supreme Court approved. If you are Donald Trump, you have made millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars from being president. If you're the people around him, some of that money's gone to you.
Yeah.
There is an entitlement that comes with that, in which you can convince yourself that you deserve that money, and anyone who is a threat to your power is a threat to that money. I hope to be a threat to that power.
Yeah.
By telling the truth.
And that power.
That takes balls. Not everybody in this town or elsewhere across America is willing to do that. Because,
no, but
I say this though too is, you know, a lot of times, and you give veterans and our military service members a lot of credit, and we appreciate that. But we don't own words, and I've said this 1,000 times, like service and sacrifice and courage. We don't own those words. Everybody can use those words.
No, but you live them in a different way.
Well, absolutely, but we did it willingly. And I think that's the thing is when you are willing to take risks, for whatever reason, we risk for our families, we risk for our fellow soldiers and Marines. That's what we do. But we do it willingly. And when people are willing to extend themselves and risk for a greater good, which I think you exercising your, constitutional rights is just as courageous at times. And our country has so many milestones of great examples of that. I think that you don't have to necessarily say you're one of them, but when you take action and you do, that makes you one of those people.
Thank you.
And there's no such thing as like this patriotic guilt where like, oh, I didn't serve, so I don't do this. No. If you're sitting here with us, you're helping. If you're sharing veteran stories and you're willing to help and extend, like you're part of.
Can I tell you one VA story?
Yeah.
Okay, so this was like 15 years ago. A good friend of mine was one of the head psychiatrists at the VA here in West LA, and I said to him, "Hey, I'd love to teach a writing class with your vets. Might be good for them to give them sort of creative outlet, like a once a month thing. What do you think?" He said, "Great, love that." Then I started going through the red tape of the VA for 2 years. 2 years of being fingerprinted, and then they wanted me to sit in a room and watch a videotape about what not to say to a vet, and it went on and on and on. And after 2 years, the program still hadn't been approved. And I understood why people go so crazy dealing with the VA.
Yeah.
And I went to the Writers Guild Foundation. I said, "Hey, I'd love to teach a class to a bunch of vets." They said, "Great. How's Saturday?"
Yeah.
Just a different experience.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I don't mean to crap on the VA, but
No, they deserve a big dump. They're so inundated with bureaucracy. That is one of the problems.
You literally need a guide to do any navigating of any aspect of the system.
yeah, I get the feeling it is sort of a rabbi culture, and I didn't have one. But anyway, going back to heroism, I think about like what a news anchor does on CNN every day. They're out there telling the truth and speaking truth to power. There are people who are blogging every single day, and everyone knows who they are, and everyone knows their names. They're very visible. If you're on MSNBC, if you're Rachel Maddow, who's a true hero of mine, you're exposing yourself to a certain level of risk. I don't know if she has bodyguards taking her to and from every day. I hope so. But she's still got to go out and go to the market, and she still likes to go fishing, or she still might want to go to a movie. She's not 24/7 with guys strapped watching her back. So that's courage to me. That's extraordinary, an extraordinary level of visibility and a determination and a willfulness to tell the truth at a time when telling the truth is really, really tough. I think about Adam Schiff, who's my congressman, and what he does every day on House Intel, what he's doing to protect his country. There are a lot of people out there who are knowingly swallowing the truth for political reasons, which has to do with elongating their career. But there are also people who are risking it every day.
Yeah.
And that's a miraculous thing.
I think it is. And to be a centrist, to be viewed as someone that I call just not even being centrist, but just having common sense and being open for discussion, where you see this splatter all over mainstream media, where it's just continual battle and divisiveness between two different sides when we're all Americans. And I think there has to be a better check and balance system than what we have going on right now. And we have seen...
Well, okay. I would argue that the Founding Fathers, for all their brilliance, they missed a few things.
What?
Right? Yeah. Well, I mean, you can start with the basics, which is they counted black people as 3/5 of a person, right? Which guaranteed the Civil War that followed 80 years later. But beyond that, there's the Founding Fathers did not see Donald Trump coming. And more specifically, more importantly, they did not see the effect he'd have on his own party. They put in place the idea of impeachment in case a president did not discharge his duties constitutionally. Clearly, Donald Trump is not discharging his duties constitutionally. Clearly, he is putting his own needs and interests above the law. So there was something in place to handle that. But what the Founding Fathers didn't count on was that there would be a party that Donald Trump shared in which other politicians would say, you know what? I hate Donald Trump. I don't really believe in Donald Trump. But if I speak out against Donald Trump, I'm not going to get reelected. Therefore, I'm going to fall in line. And that's what the Republican Party is right now. It is the party of Trump.
So, okay.
And the Founding Fathers did not see that coming. And so, as you can see, there is a mechanism in place with the Republicans holding the Senate that I think will make it impossible for the constitutional framework of impeachment to work. The only way that Donald Trump is going to be out of office is if he resigns, which seems unlikely, or if the people vote him out. And for the people to vote him out, we're going to have to overcome several obstacles. You're going to have to overcome maybe $2 billion worth of big money, dark money coming in to support him. You're going to have to, as a country, stop the Russians from infiltrating and interfering with our electoral systems, which the Department of Justice has decided they're not interested in stopping. We're all going to be pushing a boulder up a hill. I'm going to do my part.
So, okay, the whole Donald Trump thing.
By the way, I know we were here to talk about writing. Sorry.
No, we talk about anything on this
No,
show.
yeah,
Okay,
it's
good.
fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is what I really want to get at, because a lot of that stuff, it's super hard to even discuss effectively because you say clearly something, and there's tens of millions of people that go, that's not clear to me.
Okay, so let me start with that then.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
That's
yeah.
great.
Okay.
I'm so glad you said that because there are things that I look at that seem obvious.
Right.
That don't seem obvious to other people. And
let me set the stage a little bit with this, though, because a lot of people, and I'm not right or left, I'm just painting a picture. A lot of people on the left can't even think of and won't even give a single positive thing that President Trump has done. That already starts from an irrational position. So we're already starting about something like, if you can't give him a single win or a single, like, that worked or that was good, like, for example, the stuff he's done for veterans, then what are we talking about, right? And then on the other side, it's like, if you can't look at the disdainful, horrible, shitty things he does to people, to the country, if you can't see that, then what are we talking about?
Okay, so let's pick it apart one by one. Okay, let's just start with the Muller Report, which, of course, I've read.
Yeah.
The Muller Report, although Trump claims that it exonerates him, specifically says this is not exonerating Donald Trump. The Mueller report says if Donald Trump were not the sitting president, we would be filing these charges against him.
Right.
There is a Justice Department policy from the Office of Legal Counsel that says a sitting president can't be indicted. Therefore, Robert Mueller came to the conclusion there is no reason to list charges because no charges are going to be brought.
Right.
We're not indicting the guy. However, here's a roadmap for Congress. Here's what he did. And then lays out conservatively 10 cases of obstruction of justice. Remember that the first articles of impeachment of both Nixon and Bill Clinton were obstruction of justice.
Yeah.
There are at least 10 of them in there where it's not debatable, is it obstruction of justice or not? It is clearly obstruction of justice. Things like trying to get in the way of the investigation into Russia, the firing of Comey, the lying about the firing of Comey, the Trump Tower meeting that Don Jr. and Jared and Paul Manafort were at, the lying about that meeting, the pressuring Jeff Sessions not to recuse himself as Attorney General, then the pressuring Jeff Sessions to unrecuse himself. In case after case, in every way that he could have tried to stop this investigation, he did. Now, he failed in a lot of ways, but the obstruction continues. He is now trying to claim and exert executive privilege over the Mueller report, even though 90% of the Mueller report is already in the public sphere.
Yeah.
He's trying to stop Don McGahn from testifying. He's trying to empower William Barr to obstruct justice. In every way that he could be sending out a giant red flag, which is, I don't want people to know the truth.
This episode of the Break It Down Show is brought to you by The Guide for Every Screenwriter, From Synopsis to Subplots, The Secrets of Screenwriting Revealed. It's a book by Jeffrey D. Calhoun, who's known for his fast-paced thrillers, but he's won awards for his comedies and dramas alike. He's an in-demand script consultant and the founder of WeFixYourScript.com. He's also the director of the Script Summit Screenplay Contest, which is listed as one of the biggest screenplay competitions by the Script Lab, and he's been a guest of the Break It Down Show several times, including co-hosting our 200th episode with Jay Moore. In his new book, he takes the complexities of writing a script and lays them out in a simple and manageable way, tailor-made for today's attention span. I have a copy. Pete has a copy. We both bought ours as soon as the book came out, and it's terrific. It's the guide for every screenwriter, from synopsis to subplots, The Secrets of Screenwriting Revealed, and you can order it on Amazon right now and get it in 2 days if you're a Prime subscriber, and you should. Make sense of the craft of screenwriting with The Guide for Every Screenwriter by our friend Jeffrey D. Calhoun. Get it today.
I don't want people to know the truth. He's doing it. And then at the same time claiming that the truth exonerates him. They can't both be true. The human brain can't hold both of those ideas.
Yeah, okay.
Either he is exonerated by the truth, in which case he should want the truth out there, or the truth is damning, in which case he should do exactly what he's doing, which is impede. But they can't both be true. And if you read the Muller Report, it becomes really clear which is true. Okay? By the same token, if you want to talk about things that he did for vets that are helpful to vets, I'm thrilled to hear that. I'm not sad to hear that.
Right.
That's great. I still wouldn't let anyone I care about get treated at Walter Reed. Would you?
But as a guy that goes to the VA, it's really hard.
Okay.
I was just at Walter Reed last week, and I saw at the senior level, the top senior enlisted John Troxel, who invited me in, and we did a tour. Milo Ventimiglia was with me. We went around. I signed some books, and so we saw the icing. But I've also seen where the cake gets made.
Sure.
And what gets thrown out, and who gets thrown out.
Some of that cake is not a good bake.
It's very interesting, and to see how some programs are supported is great. But I also see what's discarded, and that's one of the things I'm really passionate about too. Is writing about that. And I wrote a recent op-ed in Town Hall that talked about that. It's like, well, why don't the members of Congress, Trump's going to mandate that they all, hypothetically use VA healthcare. They all have to use it. So if it's good enough for them to pass laws on and make our veterans use it, well, why don't they use it? I guarantee they'd all be jumping ship like rats.
Well, of course we jump the ship. Here's the thing. That again, this is a Republican Congress in 2017 and 2018, while enjoying the best health care known to man, as members of Congress, voted to take your health care away. They voted to strip health care from 30 million Americans. Why? Because it had the name Obama in it? Does that seem fair to you? And if we're talking about things that Trump has done for veterans, let's talk about leading up to the midterms when he decided that he was going to have veterans come and patrol the border with Mexico. They were going to give up their Thanksgiving. Why? As a campaign stunt. Everyone knew they didn't need to be there. Everyone knew there wasn't this mass caravan coming. That was a joke from the start. But his jokes translate into suffering for people. And that's why so many people in the Department of Defense said, no, we're not sending those people there. That's a stupid order. We're not going to do that. And if you want to break down the wall, everybody who's in the center of the Democratic Party completely believes in law and order and completely believes that it's their duty as public servants to keep our borders safe. Of course. It's just they don't think a wall is a good idea because a wall is 5th century technology. And why not spend that money instead on more border patrol, on drones, on Israeli anti-tunneling technology, things that will actually keep people out.
Interestingly, the guy who sat in this chair at 8 o'clock this morning, an actor, Vincent Rocco Vargas, was a Border Patrol agent for 7 years. We were kind of talking. I think it's funny that this comes back up again because we were talking about some of the same things, and I've trained with the Border Patrol in Yuma. We were talking about that on that episode. And it's really interesting because as a guy that's been there and a guy that's now, working here in Hollywood with FX, he's on the show Mayans. and he was talking about creating that story, like what the Border Patrol is actually doing. And when he said that, I was like, that's genius. I said,
of course.
It's a great story.
Well, here's another question for you. The next time you run into somebody, if you can find one, who thinks the wall is a good idea, okay, point this out to them. The border with Mexico is 2,100 miles long, okay? 800 miles of it is a river. Where's the wall go?
Oh,
okay. If you put the wall on our side, you're ceding the water to Mexico. You can't put the wall on Mexico's side, and you can't put the wall in the middle of the river. So where's the wall going to go for 1/3 of that border? By the way, of the remaining 1,300 miles, think about how much of it is owned by private citizens. You're going to go in there and eminent domain their land? You notice who doesn't support the wall? Those citizens in Texas, in New Mexico, in Arizona, in California. None of those people want the wall. None of those people think the wall makes sense. But it's a really easy, catchy
it
campaign
seems
phrase.
like, it does seem like a great bumper sticker to throw out. But what people don't realize too, and we talked about this on the episode with Rocco, was having gone out and been on the ground and in the air, watching our Customs Border agents do what they do and work their fucking asses off every day, is that 99.9999% of the job they do is helping people. It's not interdiction and busting, drug smugglers and human traffickers. That is like just like that much.
Okay, so here's another one that affects law and order.
And I also want to point out that to the north, there's about a 5,000 border.
Okay.
And then what?
Okay, well, how about
That's
this?
next
do you
election.
think-
Someone's going to say fear the Canadians or
And
something.
don't forget
crazy
that Alaska shares a long border
Where
too,
do
so
you
it's really
think,
like 8,000
where do you think
miles.
terrorists come into this country? They don't come in through Mexico. They come in through legal borders. All of them. All of them.
It is the
you want
easier way
you
to
want to
go.
protect us from terrorism? Protect that.
Yeah.
Okay? And if you're talking about law and order, and if you're a big fan of ICE roundups, and I am not one of those lefties who says abolish ICE. ICE has a role to play. Of course. Everybody in Congress
He's got
knows
his
that.
I'm not a lefty hat on today, too.
No, but
by
it's
the way.
true. I'm not. I'm a problem solver. This goes back to screenwriting.
It
Okay,
all
but
goes back to
ICE
screenwriting.
roundups.
What's the
okay?
elegant immigration answer then?
Okay, let me help with that.
Okay.
But first let me identify the problem.
Sure.
Because in any screenplay, you got to put the shark in the water before you
I can
talk
jump
about
it.
how to catch
Yeah,
the shark.
right.
Right? Okay. Without a fire in the basement, you got no story. The fire in the basement in this case is you're going to do ICE roundups and you think, oh, I know where to go get people. I'll go get illegal aliens at courthouses. That's a great place to do ICE roundups, right? Here's the problem. Let's say you're a prosecutor and you're prosecuting 2 MS-13 killers. Those are the guys we're trying to get off the streets, right? 99% of your witnesses are going to be illegal aliens who witnessed the crimes committed by MS-13 or undocumented people. If they know that coming to the courthouse, they're going to get ICE rounduped, they're not coming to testify. Guess who goes free? The 2 MS-13 killer guys. What if you decide as an undocumented alien that you don't want your kids going to school because there are ICE roundups at schools? Great. Now we got a 16-year-old undocumented alien, instead of going to school, hanging around on the streets all day. What is that kid going to turn into? Or if you're doing ICE roundups at a hospital and you're an undocumented alien and you have some disease, you're going to go to the hospital? No. You're going to stay home and spread the disease. Now you've got all sort of pandemic problems happening. All of these well-intentioned ideas about getting rid of people are being executed in such a stupid way that they're creating much bigger problems than they're trying to solve. And I don't know that people are thinking that through. So when they're saying, yeah, round them all up and get rid of them, let's talk about what that would look like. Let's talk about how that actually gets placed into practice. In the same way that Trump walked into the Oval Office one day and said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to separate families at the border. That'll be a deterrent. But in a real presidency, he would say, give me 6 months of studies on how to do that effectively so that we can actually keep track of the kids. But in the Trump White House, it was on a Friday, he made that declaration. On a Monday, they started to implement that plan. And now you've got thousands of kids separated from their families who will never find their families again. Okay, so you guys are soldiers. What do you think that kid's going to do when he's 18? Do you think that kid's going to be waving a flag saying, I think America's the greatest place in the world? What are the chances that guy's part of a sleeper cell? We are raising a generation of kids that will hate this country.
We have the same analogy we can use in combat, obviously, is, when you go into, provide security in a town so you can open it back up. I mean, you have to do some damage. And that's what we're designed for as a military force is, kill the bad guys. That's what we're great at. We're great at breaking stuff up, not building stuff up. Right. That's what we're designed to. And that's what we've seen. And in that process, if you're doing more harm to the city and especially a very volatile city that I wrote about in Ramadi, there comes a point in time where you do so much damage, as Kilcullen wrote, like you ultimately kill the town. So it just can't function anymore. And I wonder, because I'm thinking about what the shark in the water is in this case.
Well, think of it this way.
As you develop this story that's coming out on CBS with Comey's book.
Comey?
Yeah, is it really, could it be argued that Trump has found a way to get voters, as absurd as anything may seem that comes out of the administration's propaganda machine or media machine, for that matter, or is the problem the people that are receiving the information and not being guys like you who are at least critical thinkers and balance that information out?
First of all, if you look at what just happened in the midterms, where Democrats outpolled Republicans by 9.5 million votes, I think the message is getting out there, because I worked with a lot of those Democrats, and none of them said a word about Trump. None of them were running against Trump. None of them were talking about impeachment. They were talking about healthcare, which is a Democratic issue, anti-corruption, which is a Democratic issue, education, which is a Democratic issue. Do you know in the state of Oklahoma, 1/4 of the school districts are on 4-day weeks because they can't afford 5-day weeks? Oklahoma, where all that oil is. They got the money. What are they doing with it? It's insane. Those are Democratic issues. None of them were running against Trump. So I would say that the message is getting out there. But do yourself a favor if you want to go on Google. Take a look at counties in America that are suffering from opioid devastation. Okay? Then take a look at counties in America that voted for Trump. They're the same counties. They're the same map. Okay? He went where there was despair. He turned it into anger. Which would you rather feel as a person? Despair, which you blame on yourself, or anger, which you can blame on somebody else? He turned it into anger. He weaponized it. And that's how he won those counties. He had the benefit of running against the worst candidate in the history of modern American politics, in Hillary, who I think would have made a great president. But everything stuck to her, and she inspired nobody. So the combination, despair and Hillary haters, was enough. That you add those two things together, you get 62 million people. And even though she got 65 million people, he got them in the right order electorally, so he won in the Electoral College. He's not going to have Hillary haters to run against this time because there's no more Hillary, right? He's bagging 90% of Republicans, which is not enough. He needs 100% plus of Republicans. That 10% is going to make a difference. And he hasn't won a single independent voter over in 3 years. There's no one new coming to the Trump base.
I think it comes to who wants the job. And I always love, I use this a bunch of times, but I quote Charles Barkley. He was on some program. He's like, really? 330 million people? These are the two best we can get?
I know.
The last person. I'm like, that is genius, man. Like, who'd have thought that came from Barkley?
Well, look how we treat that person, too.
And I always ask this question, and I don't know if I came up with an answer or not, but I say, so if tomorrow you had to put somebody in that job, who's your person going to be? And most Americans, it's a rhetorical question, you don't have to answer it, but most Americans wouldn't be able to give you an answer because they just can't think outside of those poor suckers who are willing to be embroiled in that.
I could, for sure.
You can if you like. It doesn't have to be rhetorical.
And some of these will be names no one's ever heard of.
Tomorrow, he's in the chair. She's in the chair.
If I had to, and I'm going to talk about electability, I'm saying, who would I want running this country?
Who could do the job?
Michael Bennet, senator from Colorado, tomorrow. Really happy having that guy as president. No question about it.
What's his one attribute that makes him special?
He evaluates every policy based on what will affect the good of the largest number of people. He doesn't defend bad Democrat policies.
Right.
And, of course, He thinks that these Republican policies are suicide. I happen to agree with him. I think Biden would do a great job.
Okay, I got to. That man's going to be 80 years old if he's president. How many 80-year-old people can handle that job? That job is rigorous.
It is rigorous, but he'll only
serve
serve one term, and he has more energy than any of us. I promise you.
I argue the ageism question too. I think we'd like to see someone with a lot of vigor in it.
Well,
but you're not
typically-
running for the decathlon. You're running for president, and
Right.
that's where experience matters, not flexibility.
Right?
So,
I think if people could put their prejudices aside and just listen to what Pete Buttigieg is saying, he's got remarkable things to say about the country.
Yeah.
I would say the same thing is true of Amy Klobuchar. I think the same thing is true of Kamala Harris. I'm not a big Bernie fan. I think he represents something.
Who from the right then? I mean, that's a lot of list of people that are running in some cases, but what about someone from the right? If we're going to look at the middle, we got to gather 10+ million
You
people.
mean Republicans who aren't Trump?
Yeah, exactly. Like good,
Well,
like
Kasich.
Republican leaders. Okay.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Great.
I throw a case at your bone.
He has there are some policies of his that I'm not crazy about.
Sure.
But at least the guy has integrity.
Yeah. I mean, you don't get the president you want. You get the president that's there, right? And so if it is Kasich or somebody else.
Look, what I would encourage people to ask themselves, for example, I would encourage people who are evangelical Christians. I don't share their faith, but I respect their faith. I would ask them. I would ask them to list 10 adjectives that you would apply to Jesus, and ask if any of them apply to Trump. Selfless, humble, decent, kind, generous, right?
Yeah.
Wise. Any of those? Okay. Then I would ask you to think of 10 adjectives that we commonly apply to Trump and see if any of them apply to Jesus. Vainglorious, selfish, greedy. You can take over from there. That does not compute for me. A guy who's been married 3 times and has cheated on every single wife. A guy who has stolen. A guy who has been accused of all kinds of horrendous crimes when he was in the real estate business. And whether you guys want to believe it or not, a guy who, while running for president, said over and over again, I have no dealings in Russia, when in fact, up until June of 2016, he was negotiating to build Trump Tower in Moscow. That's not my opinion. That's a fact. Okay? This is a guy who was taking loans from Russian oligarchs and Deutsche Bank because no American banks would loan him money. This is a guy who kept telling everyone how rich he was. He's lost $1 billion. Look at his state tax records. Everything about him is a lie. Everything about his kids is a lie. Everything about his business is a lie. That does not comport to me with people in America for whom faith is their bedrock. Voting for that guy makes no sense. It makes no sense to me if you care about health care to support this guy. It makes no sense to me if you care about the environment to vote for this guy. And speaking of military issues, if you think that the environment is a bunch of tie-dye wearing hippies, ask the military what they think about the environment, about climate chaos as a national security issue. Ask the Navy what they think about the idea of rising seas, wiping out all of their bases. Ask the Army, ask the Joint Chiefs of Staff what they think about climate chaos as a destabilizing force in geopolitics and what it's going to mean 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I'm not talking about distant future. I'm talking about in our lifetime. What is it going to mean when there are less resources and less livable land because the sea has encroached on all the coasts of the world? What is it going to mean when billions of emigres are flooding out of those countries? What is it going to mean to America? What's it going to mean to destabilizing the world? If you're not thinking about that, if you're thinking about, no, I want to take care of oil producers, you're just not thinking. The rest of the world is so far ahead of us, it's a joke.
Do you think, trying to tie all this back into where you're at right now in your career,
Okay.
and it all does go back to screenwriting because
For me it does.
For working with Comey's book and bringing that to the consumers on the screen
Yes.
and trying to portray what you feel is important. Do you think at this stage of your career, those types of issues are going to become more important to you? And this is based off a long career of great films and some that have nothing to do with what's going on,
Yes.
like, Transformers or...
Well, I didn't write Transformers.
Well, yeah, but I'm
yes, I
sorry.
understand.
Yeah, but
Hunger Games.
Hunger Games. Sorry.
But I would argue that Hunger Games is the ultimate Trumpian nightmare.
Yeah.
And I wrote it before I even knew that Donald Trump was going to run for president.
But at this stage, do you feel like you're going to make a transition, or are you still there's still a balance of
this
creativity
year,
in what you do?
This year in fall, I'm very happy to have two movies that are going to be released. One is the next Terminator movie.
Super excited about that.
Very excited about that. And the other is Gemini Man, which is a Will Smith movie that Ang Lee directed. Those movies don't have any politics in them. And the other things that I'm working on,
I think that's what makes
they're the kind of stories that appeal to me. They all seem to be about integrity. I seem to be drawn to that.
Is that the theme?
As a theme of things that I write, certainly movies that I direct. They all seem to be about moral ambiguity, giving way to perfect moral clarity, and then what do you do about it, right? Which is integrity. That's the question. So I'll always write about that. I spend about half my day right now in the political space. I'm writing for a bunch of candidates at every level. I'm writing for people in Congress. I'm writing for people running for Senate. I'm writing for two people who are running for president happily and putting a lot of events together and trying to make people aware of what's actually happening in their country. Trying to bring freshman congressmen and women into LA to do these panels where I invite 400 people and they can hear what a congressperson does all day long. What is actually happening in D.C., what's not happening in D.C. There's more bipartisanship than you would think. There's much more reaching across the aisle than you would think. And CNN, MSNBC, Fox, they're not reporting the moments of Democrats and Republicans working together. There's a great...
I witnessed that personally during that trip to D.C. last month with Sergeant First Class Rich Stachel as I sat in my first U.S. House Armed Services Committee hearing for his case, and was happy to be there to support Rich as they're trying to change law so that his family can get what's due them and sue for medical malpractice. As Rich is such a tragic story that was misdiagnosed by the Womack Army Medical Center, and you look at the 26 names on those supporters of this bill, the Stachel bill on the House right now, all bipartisan.
Right.
All bipartisan.
There's a great
those
freshman member of Congress named Xochitl Torres Small from New Mexico. She represents the most rural district in the entire country. And in her district, the issue is not just health care, it's proximity to health care. You got people who live 100 miles away from the nearest doctor. Yeah. That's a huge issue for her. So she reached across the aisle. She found a Republican who also represents a rural district.
I'd rather tell those stories a million times over.
Yeah.
Of someone saying, let's work together, because
I
just don't need a Democratic or Republican answer. It bothers me that California is mostly a Democratic divided state, because that doesn't
bother me at all.
Well, I get it. But the answers are purple. They have to be.
Yes, the answers are purple, but I would also argue that a state like California, where you've got 53 members of the House of Representatives, I think 46 of them are Democrats.
Yeah.
And I'm going after those other 7.
Yeah.
Not because they're Republicans, but because individually they're bozos.
Sure.
One of them's under indictment
all the
right
bozos.
now.
Yeah.
But anyway,
and I don't think any of us like that one.
Particularly on the issue of the environment, where the official policy of the Trump administration is to go to auto companies and say, we know that under Obama you agreed to up your mileage of every car. We're stripping that away.
Yeah.
And to go up to industry and say, we know that under Obama we regulated how much pollution you can put into the sky. Fuck it. Pollute all you want. If the administration is going to do that, if they're going to tear the country down on an environmental level, you need California as a counterweight to that. 1 in 8 Americans lives in California.
I know, it's crazy.
1 in 8.
Yeah.
Okay? You need California suing the government on an issue of the environment. And by the way, I would also say, and this has a slightly military component to it, the FAA did a study one day and found that 75% of all airline crashes are when you have crew members who don't know one another. Pilots and co-pilots working for the first time together. 75% of all crashes are the result of that. NASA did a study where they took a flight crew, space station crew, that had worked together forever. They sleep deprived them for 30 hours and then put them through a series of tests. Then they took another crew that had never met one another but had perfect sleep and put them through the same series of tests. The sleep deprived crew performed better. They knew each other. You've been in an Army unit. Sleep deprived or not, you know what each other is doing. You can finish each other's sentences. That's a perfect metaphor to me for government. We have to be working together, even if we're angry at each other.
Yeah.
We have to be working together, or we're crashing into the fucking mountain. And it's that kind of bipartisanship that will ultimately save the country. Part of what troubles me about Trump is that he made it seem like you're a pussy if you can work with the other side. That there's something disloyal about working with the other side.
Yeah.
And the fact is, America's genius is its ability to compromise.
That's where we look at things, obviously, through a really, I think, privileged lens, because in the military, you have to work together as a team to achieve that type of mission success.
That's right.
And those who have served, those who are serving, I think that they really are yearning for that type of leadership. Just leadership. And, I'm as quoted saying, there's no such thing as combat leadership, just leadership. You don't have to be getting shot at or blown up to lead.
Yeah.
But we kind of want to see that across the board. And I think that, when we sit and have to digest a lot of the things that we see on TV and in mainstream media, it's just grating to the veteran community who have sacrificed and been fighting for 14 years now. And yet we've never had anyone in Washington, D.C. define what winning is to us.
That would be nice.
It would be nice.
It'd be great.
It would be absolutely a bonus to say, this is what winning is. This is why being in Iraq and Afghanistan helps our national security. And we haven't gotten those answers yet. We talk about them, but none of us sit around and pine all day that, everything we did was for naught. It wasn't.
No, of course it wasn't for naught. It was for each other.
Yeah.
Right? You guys were taking care of each other. Think about just this number dazzles me about Vietnam. In Vietnam, the United States Armed Services lost roughly 50,000 men, okay, and killed roughly 1 million North Vietnamese, which means that America was killing at a 20-to-1 ratio and still didn't win. Like, that's an unwinnable war. You can't put a soldier in an unwinnable war. It's not right. You can't do it. We seem to be insistent.
That was one of the great gems that came out of the John McKay episode.
Yeah.
When the presidency transferred during the Vietnam War, and they were already saying it's not going to win. And this is a kid that's just about to go over and fight, and he's thinking, I'm a pretty smart kid, and I'm still going to go do this, even though my government is saying we're not planning to win. And,
right.
And that was illuminating to hear from a guy at John's age who teaches at Sac State now, and has got a patch over one eye. Like, he's a great character you can write about.
Yeah.
But it's just fascinating.
Anyway, but the bottom line of all of this is you guys are capable of doing what I do, right? You guys have done things that I know would kill me. You guys have gone places that I would not have been willing to go. You guys showed a level of courage and commitment and intelligence that is a lot fucking harder than screenwriting. And I would say to any vet or anybody that's listening to this, you can do what I do. I can teach you the basic nuts and bolts of it. And then it's just up to your own imagination and your own willingness. Well, look, in this business, as in any business, there are so many variables that affect you that are beyond your control, right? Like in show business, I can't control the health of the industry or the health of our economy or whether or not DVD sales flatline or whether superhero movies are in or out. I can't control any of that. And yet they all affect my ability to make a living profoundly. The one variable over which I have any control is my willingness to work hard. So I better maximize that variable.
I like that because I'm a fan of Pressfield too, and I don't know if you read War of Art
No.
by Stephen Pressfield,
No.
who's a Marine, by the way, so I'm a little biased. But You say it in just a little bit differently, but it's the same thing that really resonates with me is somebody that does the work, and he's all about removing those distractions from your life. And I love how you say, like, yeah, don't surf the internet, don't do this, don't have all these distractions around. And by removing all of that friction in your life, it allows you to focus. And for some guys, like, that's a tough thing, is to maintain that focus to really produce.
Of course, and there are guys who come home from war and focus is actually a medical issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And I can't stand the judgment of that.
But that's also where their work is, though. Yes. If focus is where your biggest hurdle is, you don't focus on the end of the screenplay.
Right.
You focus on focus.
Yes. That's right.
Yeah. Because you sit down and do a 10-hour workday and repeat and repeat and repeat, and you have an elegance to what you do now. You've cut away a lot of your extra stuff that's not the elephant.
No, that is the elephant.
Well, I'm saying
it's not the elephant. Yes, you're right.
I'm saying that when you sit down and working, you know what the elephant is already. You've built that part of the machine. Someone who's trying to be like you, it's going to take more than 10 hours.
That may be.
Yeah, they've got to hone their skills into something that's elegant and efficient, like where you are now, and because your 10 hours they're going to beat my 10 hours of writing.
Yeah, at this point, just I've been doing it for 31 years.
Right. So, but this is an illustration for someone who's like, whatever you do, an elegant 10 hours. If you're not elegant and efficient in how you do it, you're going to have to do more.
Do an elegant 10 minutes. That's fine.
Yeah.
And then build off of it.
Right.
But anyway, I'll leave you with this as a metaphor. Picture in your head a hot air balloon, like the one that Dorothy was in Wizard of Oz, okay? Okay. In the balloon part is your confidence, your belief in yourself, right? That's what keeps the thing in the air.
Okay.
If that becomes ego, if you become the person who doesn't take notes from anybody because you're just too big a fucking genius that you don't need help, that thing goes flying off into the stratosphere, never to be heard from again. Okay? In the basket is your humility, your knowledge that you are not actually a genius, I'm clearly not, and that you need help from people, you need input from people, you need people reading every single draft and pointing out the things that are weaknesses in your work that you may have missed. If that becomes self-doubt, the thing can't get off the ground.
Yeah.
So the whole trick in screenwriting, and I think in life, is the balance between confidence and humility. You find that they're not competing virtues at all. They actually feed one another. And if you have the right amount of both, the damn thing stays in the air, right? It doesn't go flying off into nowhere, and it doesn't crash. It stays in the air, not just for one screenplay, but for 2, for 3, for 5, for 31 years. It's always trying to maintain that balance.
When you get to the level you're at, a 30-year plus career, who at this stage of the game do you use for ballast?
Well, first of all, I've had enough failure that balances me out really nicely. You can never get cocky if you've had a movie that has had its fucking ass kicked. And I have. And it's happened to me more than once. And it's a really, really humbling experience. And it
What was the movie?
Well, you talked about Secret in Their Eyes. Secret in Their Eyes was a movie where I got my brains beat in.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Wow, I got my brains beat in it. And in fact, about a week before we released, I saw that the numbers were not good. We weren't tracking well. We weren't going to make enough money. And that the long lead reviews were coming in, and I was getting crushed. They were really upset that I had remade this beautiful Argentine movie, which was the original, El Secreto de sus Ojos. And I sat my kids down. They were, I guess, at the time, 19 and 14.
That came out in like 12? Was it 11, 12?
No. It came out 4 years ago. And I sat them down and I said, look, Daddy is about to get punched in the face in public.
Here it comes.
And I'm not happy about it. It's going to hurt. But if I'm going to expose myself to the highs of Captain Phillips and Hunger Games, I have to be willing to take the lows that come with it. You cannot have one without risk of the other. And that's the way it goes. And what that did was, well, first of all, it took all the fun out of reading other people's movies getting shitty reviews. Like, I used to get this perverse pleasure out of seeing people get a shitty review and saying, fuck him. That's gone now.
Now it stings a little more.
Because I felt it. It really sucks. And I think it was such a great way to take my own temperature in terms of hubris, because I had had enough movies in a row. They were called Shatterglass, Breach, Captain Phillips, where the critics loved me. I kind of thought I was their boy. I really didn't think they would ever give me a shitty review. That was hubris. That was just stupid. And that's gone. That's completely gone. So there's that for balance. And then the other thing that creates balance is I care about my kids. I care about my wife more than I care about this. And the third element is I give my scripts to people who tell me the truth.
Yeah.
I give my scripts to people who are very tough on me, who will tell me this is not ready, and here's why.
The truth.
So that by the time I hand in a first draft to a producer, it's a sixth draft. I've jumped through a lot of hoops, and I've echolocated, right? I've sent out that radar to a bunch of different people to see what's pinging back, to know how close I'm getting to my target. That's humbling too.
It's a great resounding piece of advice too, is just surrounding yourself with authentic, honest people. And that network again is couldn't be any further outside of my area of expertise and what I know about, and I've kind of brought into this. But meeting Billy through the Writers Guild, and then my story comes out, and then this is an interesting connection that Billy and I share is Frank Buckley.
Hey, Buckley,
Frank,
the greatest.
what's happening, buddy? So Frank Buckley interviews here at KTLA, who I catch on the morning news. I do Frank Buckley interviews, and we're talking about the story, and Frank loves vets, and his dad was in the Navy, and so he says, he just starts, I think we're in the studio after the interview, and he says something, he goes, "Hey, would you get a signed copy of your book to a buddy of mine, Billy Ray?" And I says, "Oh, Billy Ray." I says, "He was actually mentoring us at Writers Guild." He goes, No shit. And what was your connection again? You went to undergrad school?
No.
Wives,
My wife went to grad school with him.
That's right.
At a school whose name I do not mention.
I wanted to ask, because Scott and I had actually discussed hot air balloons on Monday, and I wanted to get Scott's thoughts on, it's beautiful air balloons, like in Temecula all the time.
They're all over the place. Yeah. When you've flown the controls of an F-18 and an F-5, I just think it would be a massive letdown. It's like, I don't know. I don't want to
go up.
I don't want to use any dating analogies, but I just I think there'd be just the thrill would be gone for me. But I have been very lucky to do a lot of sexy stuff. Even as an infantry guy, I got to actually fly airplanes when I was an instructor in Yuma.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's just nuts. But even in the military, I always created opportunities for myself, and it meant me getting dunked in the helo dunker in Miramar and thrust around a little bit and yanked up in the harness. But I love creating opportunities for myself, and I think even at this stage of my life, as I'm closing in on 50 now, I love meeting new people and being involved in these arenas, whether it's entertainment or public speaking or podcasting. There's just so many cool people, and as we look around, we're like, even the loud guys behind us with the accents may be annoying. You never know who they are.
You never know.
Like, who is that guy?
By the way, there are a lot of ex-vets serving in Congress right now.
Yeah.
And you guys should track all of them. A ton of them ran in 2018. Yeah. Jason Crow from Colorado, and Alyssa Slotkin from Michigan, who I know. She's amazing. She's
Dan Crenshaw.
ex-CIA, Crenshaw, a bunch of them.
I'm hopeful that they will apply those lessons of leadership and sustain them. It really is my hope, is that they'll sustain that ethic and that ethos that is imbued in all of us, from entry-level training to advanced-level training in whatever branch of service you're in, that type of leadership is sustained, and they shield themselves from the corruption and the influence that ultimately is.
Look, I would hope so.
Bringing it down.
And I see it through my own biased lens. Dan Crenshaw survived things that I wouldn't have exposed myself to, and that would have killed me if I did. That said, one way to look at the place that we're in as a country right now is, at Pearl Harbor, we were attacked, and our president responded. At the World Trade Center on 9/11, we were attacked, and our president responded. In November of 2016, we were attacked by an adversary, A foreign country decided they were going to choose who our president was. And you can debate their level of effectiveness. James Clapper, who would know, told me that the determining component in that election was the impact of the Russians. Okay? But whether you believe that or not, it is indisputable we were attacked by a foreign country.
Couldn't agree more.
Act of war. And this president not only has not responded, he keeps saying it didn't happen. 17 intelligence agencies have said definitively, yes, it happened. And my one complaint with Congressman Crenshaw is he has sided with his party in looking the other way. I don't hear anybody on the Republican Party running around with their hair on fire saying, what are we doing to safeguard the next election? Because they think the next election, if they get help from the Russians,
not just
it helps their
elections,
cause.
Billy, but national security. Every panel I sit on and every academic think tank I go to, veterans or civilians, everyone likes to talk about the ambush this or the loss of life here or this. At the end of every panel, you know what the resounding theme is when asked the question, what's the biggest threat to national security? Cyber. Every single time. And yet there's crickets at that stage. It's like, how do we defend against it?
Cyber can shut down your banking system. It can shut down your energy grid.
So catastrophic.
Of course.
And what is a greater loss? I think I wrote about this in some pithy op-ed too, was, what's a greater loss? A platoon of Marines getting ambushed and 5 guys getting killed and another, 3 guys getting their legs blown off? Or our power grid being attacked, our banking institution being, what is a bigger loss to America?
Mm-hmm.
You can't quantify that.
No, you cannot.
But when you think about it in practical terms, like if you don't have a way to defend against it militarily or from the government that you elect, we're not. Okay, so we don't have a 1,000-year plan like some governments.
So you talk about leadership.
Because we've only been around for just over 250 years.
So you talk about leadership. Leadership means standing up in front of the country and saying, this is a threat that we all face, and here's what we're doing about it.
And prioritizing it.
Okay, and I would ask, has anybody heard this president say those words? When talking about the Russians, when talking about cyber, when talking about Saudis, right? All of these people, the North Koreans, all of these people have very sophisticated cyber systems that can attack us, and did. This is not hypothetical. They did it.
Yeah, and then
what are we doing about it?
It goes back to defining winning. Like, well, how do we win? What is the end? How do we win that aspect of the war?
I would argue that Donald Trump would think that his winning is what matters, not America's winning. That's my complaint with him, among others.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap it. If people, so the film coming up is going to come out.
Okay, so October will be Gemini Man. November will be the new Terminator movie. November is when I go into production on Comey, which will be 2 nights, 4 hours on CBS and CBS All Access, although possibly also on Showtime. And I expect that to be on the air in June.
And if people want to find out and follow you on politics or movies online, social media?
I can't believe I'm saying this, but they could follow me on Twitter.
Yes.
I don't even, what is my Twitter
Billy
handle?
Ray 5229,
at
right?
Billy Ray 5229. That's right.
Yeah,
Okay,
which
good.
those numbers mean nothing to me.
It was the address of the building where I grew up as a kid. I grew up in an apartment in the valley.
Nothing sexy.
And I think social media is like the dumbest thing in the world. I hate it. So I can't believe I'm telling people they can follow me on Twitter. I just feel like a douchebag.
You throw some gems out there too.
Yeah, this
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll do my best.
Yeah,
and then you've got Will Smith was a Mega Man. Now he's Gemini Man. I'm hoping that we'll get like Upsilon Man.
I love it.
I'll talk to him.
Hey, thanks again.
It's a pleasure and a privilege to be with you fellas.
Yeah.
Thank you.